even at that young age, I had learned to embrace that just because I don't know a genre, that's actually an invitation to learn a thing so that I can pull it into me.
Yes,
So-
yes, yes. Welcome to Sound Plus Doctrine, the podcast of Sovereign Grace Music, where we explore what the Bible has to say about music and worship in the church, and encourage those who plan, lead, and participate in their Sunday gatherings each week. Hello, and welcome to the Sound Plus Doctrine podcast. My name is David Zimmer.
My name is Bob Coughlin.
And we are on a second episode with the incomparable Josh Scott of JHS Pedals.
I don't know if he's incomparable.
I don't know anybody else.
I compare him to people. I mean, no one comes to mind, but I'm sure there's someone we could compare him to. Anyway, Josh, it's great to have you back.
Good to be here. Love it. Had a lot of fun last time.
Love the first conversation. Got into some great conversations about the value of music versus the value of Jesus and our own value and how we look at all that stuff. So if you haven't seen or heard that one, you should listen to that one.
Definitely.
But today we're going to talk more about the place of the electric guitar in the congregational gathering, Sunday church. Of course, there was a time, I'm little older than you guys, and there was a time when electric guitars were not exactly appreciated
satanic
in the Sunday gathering,
just like the drum kit,
music. And you're welcome for paving the way for that.
But thank you, honestly.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
But no, in many churches there are electric guitar players, and sadly, I would say, a lot of times those electric guitar players don't exactly know what they're doing.
Yes.
And why they're doing what they're doing.
Or they think know that they think that they're adding a lot to the gathering, but.
And we've seen those YouTube videos where that happens. And it's sad. Or they just stand there, they just don't quite know. Or they play it like an acoustic guitar. So anyway, we'd like to start with just your journey. I think in the last podcast you said you were playing. Were you playing in the church in high school?
No, I was
just playing electric.
But my encounter with the Lord, I pretty much immediately was getting involved in worship music. Yeah.
Okay. So did you start playing for the church? Yeah.
This is like, I would call this like peak worship together era. This is like heart of worship. No, it'd be like Here I Am to work, like Tim Hughes.
Here I Am to work, Tim Hughes. Yep. And so,
are you playing acoustic or electric?
Well, I had both. Okay. But electric mainly. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Great.
Yeah. So, that whole era of, it was like British worship leaders.
Yes. Listen, I remember the first Delirious album I heard, cassette, in the mid-90s, and thought, what is this?
Yeah.
This is crazy.
I am Delirious a lot with this discussion. For understanding, like, at first I thought, guitar, I don't know, like, this doesn't fit. And then I heard Delirious and it helped me.
And they, would you say they were riffing off of you too? Was that the
Yeah. And I know Stu really well now. I love talking to him because they didn't.
Steve is
Stu.
Oh,
Stu. He's the guitarist. He's the guitarist. One of the primary songwriters, him and Martin. And they were just making music. But when you look at it in hindsight, it's, they grew up listening to Queen, U2, and, they were just making music. I love the American thing is that there's a little more of the term like that is secular in America. And then in England, it was like, we're just believers and and that's interesting with music.
Yeah. We're all stealing from each other.
Well,
we always have.
And so you had no problem playing electric in your church at that time.
Other people may have, but I didn't.
It's good that the electric player not have problems with it. But you have Psalm 33, which says, give thanks to the Lord with a lyre, make melody to him with the harp of 10 strings. Now there are only 6 on the guitar, but it's close.
I need more.
Sing to him a new song, play skillfully on the strings with loud shouts. So we would love to.
Shouts could be distortion.
Yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. So you played both acoustic and electric. Would you say you played one more than the other?
No, to me, guitar is guitar. I think to most, you get into the world of like just guitar players.
Yeah.
You'll have a lot of people when they're starting, they'll say phrases like, and this is not negative. It's just when you're learning, you go, I want to be a lead guitar player, or I want to be a rhythm.
Yes,
like,
yes.
Like, you need to be a guitar player. You need a lead guitar player is useless. Like, if that's all you know how to do, we can get into that later.
No offense to those of you who consider yourself
who shows
lead
up at
guitarist.
a gig? Like, you're an amazing piano player. Who shows up at a gig and they're like, I'm a lead pianist? Like, anyway.
Bob definitely does
Well,
it.
I have done that occasionally. Okay, so this would be great. So your own journey is you were playing in the church,
And your church was okay with you playing electric.
Yeah.
and
Okay.
you didn't think of yourself as that lead player, that rhythm player. You just said, as you said, you're curious, you're obsessive, you're just going to learn to play the guitar well.
Yeah, I'd have to think about it a little more. I don't know what I thought. I remember because I'm coming from a world of, I have been in rock bands. I have this encounter with the Lord. I'm over here like a grunge kid guitar player who's getting into Brit rock and like guitar U2 and Radiohead. And the guitar is this very versatile instrument. I mean, all of this stuff you can explore. And I remember getting into the church environment, and the worship together thing is kind of happening, but most people were on keys, and it was a little gospel-y, a little gospel flair and some of it. And I was unfamiliar with most of that. And I remember the initial feelings of like, whoo, I don't know how to play with this a little bit. Like, this is uncharted for me, right? And I remember like trying to play along with I believe it was a hymn. It might have just been Come Thou Fount or something. And I remember like I remember having this moment, because it's almost like you have to deprogram and think about the guitar we'll get into this as, what is an instrument? What am I trying to serve here in the song? And I was like, I've never played anything with so many chords. That was like a thought I had. I remember this, and that was a little scary. I was like, there's so many chords. Like, I don't even have time to establish anything here.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
So when I say all that, I just was open to evolving and unlearning, and like, how could I make the guitar work here? That was always at the front of my mind.
That is so good. Yeah, because I want to talk about your evolution as a guitarist. That was part of it. Just realizing the skills you had up to that point were not sufficient to really serve the church effectively.
Not at that time. No, no.
So can you talk about, and I'm thinking here, people listening here, either you are a guitar player, you have like a guitar player in your band, maybe your child is a guitar player, I don't know. What are some of the things that you came to see were most important, and on two levels, both on the heart level and then the skill level? You can do those in order, you can do them together, but just how did you evolve? Obviously, I love that picture of, that was one of the questions I had. Any thoughts for electric guitar players playing hymns? You had this moment where you realized, oh my gosh, I am unequipped to do this. So that's
Where do I fit? Where do I fit in these hymns?
Yeah, you could get angry, say, let's not do these songs, or you could say, I'm not going to play for the church, but obviously you adapted. You're a humble guy. So just what are some of the things you saw about your heart, about your skills, that you'd want to pass on to others?
Yeah, I think some of these traits came from learning as a musician, being really obsessive, as I discussed in the other podcast, and then having done some studio work and had been around some like understanding guitar as a tool. I had an understanding of this. I grew up in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, like very famous studio town. I cut demos with band. Like, I had been in some rooms where I understood what it felt like to not know what I was doing, but I also understood, and I'd read a lot about my favorite musicians and stuff. I embraced, even at that young age, I had learned to embrace that just because I don't know a genre, that's actually an invitation to learn a thing so that I can pull it into me.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
that's
yes,
great.
yes.
So, Miles Davis, that quote I love is the greatest musicians are thieves who never get caught. So how do you get to that point?
Yeah, that's good.
You have to explore. I mean, I have sat and learned chicken picking country. I've gotten into jazz. I've listened to Coltrane records and thought about and and you become you by synthesizing
Yes.
everything you love.
Yes.
So when I faced a hymn, I didn't go, "What is this garbage?" It's like actually, to be honest, in my heart, it was beautiful. I knew I'd heard hymns, I wasn't like in a bubble. I'd heard like Old Rugged Cross, and I was from Alabama,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Hymns are like playing at Walmart. So
Yeah.
I just was like at a spot where I was like, this is really beautiful. I don't know how to do this, but hey, there's wow, look at these stacked chords. Look at this, like, this is this is not 4/4 here. This is, this is not where the streets have no names.
Right, right.
So it was an opportunity to find something else, to another path that led to what would ultimately become who I am as a guitar player now, at 2 decades later, 3 decades later.
Yeah, Josh, that's like huge, especially for young guitarists or any musician, drummer, bass player, pianist. It's like what the Miles Davis quote you said reminds me of, like, Austin Kleon's book, Steal Like an Artist. It's like,
Great book.
Guys, we're not talking about stealing the whole time on the podcast. Good night.
but like a true artist, gives credit where he found it and then changes it, like makes it his own. And that's like what you're saying. I think so often we want to serve our congregations the best we can on our instrument, but we're limited. We're limited either in technique or taste. And so I feel like you can get a lot of good technique in lessons or books or YouTube videos, but taste comes from what you're talking about, taking from all these different sources. So it's like, if this song on Sunday needs more of a classical feel on a picking acoustic, I can draw from that because I've played in that territory. So I just think it's so important for young musicians and old musicians to hear that. Don't just do the one thing you do over and over again.
Again, I think this is every creative discipline. Like, if you want to have good taste, if you want to be versed, like, take it food. If I want to have good taste in food and I only eat chicken McNuggets, it's never going to happen. And then, if I want to be a professional anything, like a plumber or a lawyer, if I'm a professional plumber that says, I only install P-traps under kitchen sinks, I'm never going to get work.
Right.
It's like, there's such a logical thing that musicians don't grab early.
Yeah.
They think that John Mayer woke up and, like, from the womb was playing this. They don't see that he has adapted these 10 other artists and synthesized them, and he may not even enjoy 2 of them anymore.
Right.
But he became a professional in what it took to find those flavors and tastes. So yeah, you just gotta, like, accept the challenge of, I don't know how to play this. That's fun. Like, at least your instrument's still fun.
Right. Yeah. And I had someone said that Mayer couldn't do it on his own, so he stole the band of the records he loved and put them on his records, like all the D'Angelo musicians.
Yeah.
It's so funny, but it's, to your point, it's be well versed if you want to serve in your context or in any field you are in.
Yeah. Okay. If you want to be a professional guitar player, you need to play stuff you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's bring it down to the church. So as you think of playing for the church, what should, and let's focus primarily on electric guitar players, because there's a lot of acoustic guitar players out there.
Yeah.
What should an electric guitar player be thinking, like in terms of what could I do? What do I have to offer? What do I have to bring? I mean, obviously, none of our instruments are needed. God doesn't need our instruments. He can use them.
Sure.
But so with that understanding, what can electric guitars bring to a congregational setting? How should they be thinking about their role?
Yeah, and would you also add to that like the heart of what?
Well, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
The technical side, but also the heart posture. What is the heart posture of an electric guitarist?
Get in as many leads as you can.
Just shred constantly. Remind me, I'll tell you a story about one time when I was leading. Yeah.
Tell it now. Tell it now. We'll get back to the question.
Yeah. Okay. It actually does work. It does work here. So, I pretty much became a worship leader really early in my walk with the Lord and loved it. And I led from electric or acoustic pretty equally. And I always treated my worship teams like a band. I tended to have several bands I would build. And so the church that my wife and I planted, they got rather large. So I had about 3 bands, and I would treat them differently, and I would mentor other people to lead some of them. And so I had this kind of culture of, I treat it like a band. Because I was familiar with bands, and I was like, well, I'm not a choir director. I knew that early on, so I didn't try. And I was always trying to just pull in normal players because, I'm a normal player, and there's people out there. There's this one guy, though. The nameless guy. We'll never say his name ever, but he just, I could never rein him in. I mean, I'd be up there, this is 2004, so I'm like, I don't know, let's just say I'm up there, real sensitive moment, playing Catherine Scott Hungry or something, and it's subtle, and you're just creating this atmosphere for introspective, just you're creating that moment. And this dude just on his Strat with a Marshall behind him, just shredding really bad blues licks. We're talking,
here we go.
Because this is how every song sounded then. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, soft.
He's just literally, you'd hear
Oh,
Jimmy Page in the back.
So the lesson there is, I think guitar players should think, I mean, the textbook answer, that is correct. It's, 90% of the time you'll probably get the answer, because you should give your best to the Lord. You need to think about what you're doing and, be good at it, have a heart, a humility. That's all very true.
Yes.
At the end of the day, guitar is an instrument. An instrument's a tool, and it's there to perform a function or task. So I like to think really practically. I know this is spiritual stuff, but the natural and the spiritual are, God's in all of this. It's all one big ball of yarn. So what's the task of the guitar? It's there to serve whatever is happening. It's at the end of the day, that guy was oblivious to what was actually happening.
Right.
Sometimes it's as simple as just what is happening and maybe I shouldn't play. That's the best service. Or maybe it's wow, there's this seam here where the guitar's voice works to say something. And I think what most guitarists don't want to hear, and what the greatest guitarists in the world of all of history have learned, this applies to the church, it applies everywhere. The best guitarists know when to not play. This is every instrument.
yes. Yes.
It's just giving space, being aware. I feel like just the guitar is a tool, just like any other tool. If you misuse it, you're misusing it. You don't take a hammer and change a tire, So that's the practical side of how it could be really helpful for so many, especially younger guitarists. You're not the main character. No one is.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was at a wedding recently and playing with a cellist, and they had been a part of Sovereign Grace churches for a while and knew who I was. And I forget, it was just a piano, a guitar, acoustic, and a cello, no amplification. And so I was playing a recessional and just kind of playing fully. And I don't receive many encouragements like this, but the guy came up to me and said afterwards, man, I never realized over these years like how much you were holding back. No one ever says that to me. They're always saying to me, can you hold back?
Rein it in a little bit?
But it is that I was reminded that, praise the Lord, there's some evidence that I have grown, and that being your best, giving your best, being the most excellent you can be does not mean using all the skills you have.
Yeah, restraint.
Yeah. It's being prepared to serve the moment. And that's a full sentence. Like, being prepared means, back to that first topic, you need to learn some stuff you never thought about learning, because you might feel that moment where like, oh, that's where that goes. And if you don't have it in your tool belt, you can't use it. So being prepared, serving in a worship environment, yeah, it's like a ballet of sorts. Like, no one's the main character. You're just trying to serve what is happening. You're just part of a tool belt, and that's beautiful.
Josh, have there been any ways of practicing, and maybe not, that have helped you that you found, oh, okay, this is the best way to develop this skill, or this has been really helpful to develop this skill? And I also want to hear about any particular skills that you found helpful when serving a congregation.
I'm a really horrible person to talk about practice. I don't ever.
You don't practice.
I used to try to give guitar lessons and stuff, and I think I just harmed people forever. I mean, my general approach, I think it's that part of that brain that I talked about, I just really get into stuff. I basically, my whole guitar path has been listening to records and learning records.
Immerse yourself.
And taking, hundreds, if not thousands of things from records or people, getting with players in person that I'm like, if I see a guy in town, or if I was around people as a teenager, just like, hey, show me that. And then just letting that synthesize itself.
Yes.
I don't really have any better advice.
That's
because
good.
I think the education of guitar can go so many ways.
Yep.
I'm not great in the classroom. My head starts itching, and I just can't do it. I have to kind of fight through stuff on my own.
Yeah.
But other people really love structured, today on part 3. I think that I just can't connect that way. So learning records, though, I mean, I think that's the age-old way, and being real life with other musicians, playing with other people, and don't ever discount that. Every opportunity,
very good.
Just get with some people and play music, because stuff happens. There's a very natural process of, something's happening here, rhythms and music and notes, and it all comes together.
It is the way God has designed music, where there's this. It's so fascinating. Music in itself is such a fascinating gift that God has given us for His glory, and we get to use it in that way to magnify Jesus in such a way that we also get to enjoy the music that we're magnifying with. It's remarkable. So, any particular skills that you found helpful, like in a congregational setting? Does someone need to? And I'm going to ask you too about 3 JHS pedals you think would be most helpful for someone who's just figuring this stuff out. But in terms of skills, for instance, I know not all electric guitar players know how to just have a nice, just sustained tone, like chord tone. Just provide a bed. I don't know if that's a skill or.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it's a skill. And then there's electric guitar players that don't know how to play lead lines. And so what's their role? And then there's guitar players that really only know how to play lead lines because they listen to music that's lead heavy and don't know how to provide that sort of rhythm. We talked a little bit about that, like the difference between these players, and we've talked about how to be a holistic guitar player coming into a church, but how do you think about what tools do you use on a Sunday that serve the congregation?
Yeah. like, again, one sentence is, whatever you're struggling with, find people that do it well in person or on records, and just hound them, hound that record or that
That's
person,
good.
and you'll figure it out. So then, yeah, what are the skills? So yeah, guitar is an incredibly versatile instrument. And I think that's one of the interesting things about it in a band scenario or in a worship team scenario is the guitar can be so many different things that it can actually be irritating, because you'll have it, if I play piano, okay, I play keys. You can kind of feel what those two things mean. Usually nowadays, if somebody plays keys, I can kind of picture a Nord. I see a laptop. I play piano. If you meet a certain person, you're like, oh, they're a that's a piano player. Guitar, I play guitar. You're like, it's that wheel on the Wheel of Fortune when you spin it, and it's like, where are you going to land on the 38 different guitar styles? So the thing with this, I think that's important is everybody has something they are drawn to the guitar with, and the guitar is so versatile. That's why the guitar has survived, by the way. It's important to know the context of the guitar really almost didn't survive the 1800s. It gets into the 1900s. It's electrified in the 30s, 1932, and that electrification of guitar is what gave it this survival ability. It suddenly became an instrument that could almost do anything. I love these early ads for like the first fuzz pedal, the vibrato arms on a 50 Strat. It's like makes horn noises, simulate a cello. Like these are the ads.
Right.
The guitar starts evolving into this. It evolves into, other than a synthesizer, the most versatile instrument ever. And that's why it's also so challenging. So as a worship leader, I think you've got to lock in with what people say. There's a semantic issue. I play guitar. The first thing that could be helpful to any teams, what do they mean? Let's talk about it. Let's have it. Like, how great would it be if you just took 15 minutes and listened to what they say guitar is? That's a big start. And then what are the skills? Then you start incorporating, well, hey, cool, you're what I would call an ambient shoegaze guitarist. You know, I love that. I fall into that a lot. I'd say, well, hey, have you ever played acoustic and like done dag-dad tuning and swing them the other way? And like, the skill set that's really needed with guitar is versatility. I think it's understanding it as an instrument. You don't have to love it all. Like, I don't want to sit around and play like Buck Owens or something like this. But I could sit here and go like, you know, I know like a bluegrass, like, you know, like I get it.
Very well done.
I think it's, what are those skills you need? I think it's trying to dive into the versatility and understand that the guitar is problematic to teams and to guitarists because it means so many different things.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a good answer to the question. That's what comes to mind, because it's really almost the better question is what are we even saying guitar is sometimes in worship? Because you guys were doing it, you're like a pad, a space, an ambience, a lead line, a rhythm, like those are
rhythmic
different
plucking thing. I know some guitar electric players will
delay, the U2 thing.
So dotted eighth on everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's not. And so the whole idea of taste and listening, I think what you brought up a number of times is listening. What sounds good when you listen? And do you know how to do that? Can you reproduce that? If not, well, then you should learn how to do it.
Yeah, one of my favorite final thought here, again, I think it's some of this fundamental thinking about music is one of my favorite practices. I love recording, and I've produced some records like this where people before Pro Tools and computers would use tape machines, and you had limited tracks. So a lot of the classic records from the age of electronic recording all the way through the 70s and 80s, a lot of the really amazing band music you hear, it's people in a room playing off each other and being aware. The computer destroys the awareness of the recording world.
Absolutely.
So now you have layers, and we have a generation of young people now I'm kind of at the dead end of that in the 90s. Like I experienced using monitors in a band and in a garage, but now you have a lot, and especially in the church, guitarists are from teenagers through adulthood now. We have 30-year-olds who have never not played with in-ears in their ears. And there's a fundamental challenge of like you're not really hearing. You're like you're hearing everything the same layer. It's one dimensional. So this practice of like getting in a room and like, man, have you ever recorded
So good.
If anyone is bored enough to do this, it's a wonderful team experience. Take one microphone, put it in the middle of your band and record a song and tell every musician if you can't hear them, you're too loud.
Yes.
And that's how they recorded in the 60s. So you end up with this like circle and you're actually having to think about them. Like that's what's fascinating about modern music. So when you end up on a church platform or any band, especially church though, because I think there's not enough education on this. How often is the guitar player worried for the keyboard player?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
good.
the key. Like how often is the drummer worried for the bass player? And that's something really special. That's where music is music.
Yes.
When people are worried for each piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just did at the last Worship God conference, I did a pre-conference masterclass on piano. I was trying to revise it and thinking, how could I approach this differently? And the first thing I said to them was, it's really important what you listen to. First thing you need to listen to is your lyrics. That's the very first thing you listen. What in the world are we singing? Second thing you need to listen to is your congregation. The third thing you need to listen to is the other instruments. And the last thing you need to listen to is yourself. And for me, that was like a revelation. It's like, oh,
Really good.
but you're saying that. And I love the idea of playing in a room. You actually need to hear the other people. Those are such great points, Josh. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I'm just thinking like the history of recording and good music, that's fundamental. You know, that is, I think it's very spiritual. I think, you know, God created this art.
Yes.
But I do think that it's so exemplified in historical recordings that we've lost. It's an art. It's a bit of a practice that sadly the technology that's so wonderful, multi-track recording, kind of just started deleting that from society a little. And I think it'd be very helpful for people to imagine that a little bit more. And it gets you in that spot of like, music is a collaborative moment. It's not me.
But even in our day and age of like where records are at right now, I still think there will forever be a purity of that band in the room, you know? And there's
that's
records.
Why so many people still do it. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
And that's what's so exciting.
Okay, we're a little over time, but someone's new to this. They don't know JHS pedals. 3 JHS. How many JHS pedals are there?
Probably like, I mean, roughly 40 or so, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Three that you'd say you should probably get this. And what do they do?
Yeah, I mean, some just very fundamental, practical things. I think in the environment of like house of worship, praise and worship stuff, a reverb is very useful. So I would say like the 3 series reverb. I have 3 different versions of what I would call reverb.
Wow.
Reverb is the sound of a space. It's like delay is the sound of like echo. But reverb is important because you're simulating, you know, reverb's invented to simulate a room when they didn't have that room. So what that does for guitar is it kind of helps soften it. It helps place it in a mix. So one of the 3 series reverbs, those always really nice.
That counts as one pedal.
Yeah. So the 3 series reverb is what I would say. Yeah. Next would be, you know, for just good sound. Like, yeah, we can affect the guitar. We can give it all these bells and whistles. We can give delays and all these tricks. But at the end of the day, like, what is tone and good foundational sound? I'd say you need something in your rig that before you start adding delays or distortions or whatever and getting crazy, like, what does your guitar sound like? So the pure sound of your guitar, I think that's an important, like, you don't build a house on sand, right? So like with your guitar tone, you need to build it on a good strong point I have a product called the Clover, which is essentially this. It's a preamp. It has XLR out as well. So this works on acoustic, bass guitar, keys, pianos, and electric. And it's just fundamentally just a device you put on your board that gives you a really good, strong, clean, warm, beautiful foundational sound.
That's great.
That's a good.
I'd like that for my voice.
Yeah, we all need that. And then thirdly, just for fun, we talked about Delirious a little bit. I developed a pedal with Stu, who is the guitar player, because Delirious to me was really helpful, in my path of understanding the guitar can fit. That was really cool. There's a pedal called the Kilt, and it is essentially kind of overdrive all the way to fuzz. So this one pedal, it's smallish, like it's versatile. You can do any kind of distortion sound you want, overdrive, distortion, or fuzz. Wow. And it's just it is a pedal that is all over praise and worship music for the last 10 years. Just because it's so versatile, and that's why we made it.
Josh, this has been amazing.
Yeah.
We have to do this again.
Yes.
Thank you for your work, in this whole field, but more importantly, thank you for your desire to make much of Jesus with what you do. And
thank you guys for having me on here. I love this relationship, and man, I just even coming that first time we met, just so impactful. I've enjoyed just anything I can do with you guys.
Well, the honor is ours, the glory is Jesus's.
Yes.
And thank you all for joining us, and we hope we'll see you again.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Sound Plus Doctrine, the podcast of Sovereign Grace Music. Sovereign Grace Music exists to produce Christ-exalting songs and training for the church from our local churches. For more information, free sheet music, translations, and training resources, you can visit us at sovereigngracemusic.org.